How are you?
How are you?
Good. I am so excited to do this. I'm like a little bit nervous because I'm like, the whole point of the show is to like not minimize you and your amazingness in the context of motherhood, right? So I'm like, how do we do that when we're talking about pregnancy? So I'm like, we're going to try to walk like a very fine line of like being like, this is Brittany. She's a person. Like she has like a whole ass life. And also we're talking about this component of your life or this facet of your life.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of good that this is the day I decided I was going to be at work anyway. So I'm in my office. But I also I'm always like that. Like there's always the two parts of me. And I don't know if I ever told you, like I had a huge like mom life crisis after having Blythe, where I was like, I'm going to party really hard. Yeah. I'm breastfeeding. I'll pump and dump. Like I'm still a person. I'm still 27. Like I'm not, like I didn't die. I just had a baby. Like,
you weren't actually 27, were you?
When I had Blythe. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we've all been 30 forever. So I literally, I can't wrap my head around that. I didn't realize.
Don't you remember being in that apartment, Alex bouncing her to sleep in that weird way?
I honestly I cannot wrap my head around the fact that we were that young when you had because I had AJ at 29, right before my 30th birthday. And I was like, man, I'm so young compared to like everybody else I know who's having kids at like 35.
Absolutely. And I mean, listen, Blythe went to private school in New York City. Those women were like 40. So that was a whole thing.
But also I think that what is the word? Like you project a maturity.
I'm a mom figure. I've always been a mom figure.
I don't know if I would say mom figure. I just think like you're very like mature, right? You don't like.
I hear you. It's not this the.
That's why the partying is so funny.
Yeah, it's not the society's version of a mother, but I'm very much the like, all right, come on, tell me your problem. Okay, all right, we're gonna get to the bottom of this. I'll take care of it. Like I've always been like that, even as a like baby, as a child, very much like, okay, all right, tell me, little kids on the playground.
Okay, I need you to stop talking so that we can like actually record this formally. Okay. You can't. No more fun, Brittany. We're here to work. Yeah. I'm so excited to do this. I'm like, it didn't occur to me that like people would actually be down to do it. Yeah. And so now I'm like, oh my God, I can just hang out with everybody. I'm so pumped. Okay. So the first questions I'm going to ask you, just so you can be like emotionally prepared. I'm going to ask you your pronouns and what.
Welcome to the podcast, Kelly. I know.
Okay, fine. No. Your emoji and what emoji you identify as your pronouns. And I don't do long intros. Like I would love for you to just introduce yourself and tell people what you think matters. Okay. Welcome back to the Not Your Mama podcast. This is your host, Kelly Bryant, creator and founder of Kelly Bryant Wellness. And I'm joined today by Brittany Dewire. Hi, Brittany.
Hello. Hi, Kelly.
Can you start by telling us your pronouns and what emoji you identify as?
So my pronouns are her, she, and they, which I've been trying to get people to use they since I was like a kid. Everyone told me I was wrong in grammar, but I very
love it. I'm here for that.
So my emoji, there's kind of two, which is kind of cheating, but my heart is the Wakanda forever, right? But the all the time is the shrug emoji, like all the time.
Those two together are the best.
Yeah, and sometimes I've used them together. Like I'll literally, yeah.
Wakanda forever, kind of. Wakanda for a while.
Meh.
Amazing. Okay, so you are a parent, and that's what we're here to talk about. But I would love for you to start by introducing yourself, the wholeness of yourself. What do you like for people to know about you when they get the pleasure of meeting you?
So starting when I was little, I mean, I'm the youngest of 6 children. I have 5 older brothers, and I feel like that has helped every single facet of my life. I played a gazillion sports when I was younger. I played Division I soccer in college. I went to law school. I'm a lawyer. I'm actually a support magistrate for the state of New York. And I have a wonderful husband and 2 beautiful children. And yeah.
I don't think I knew the support magistrate part of your title, which I'm super excited that you went to Hogwarts. That's amazing.
Yes.
That you're magic now.
I am. It's one of those things I keep under wraps. About it, but yeah.
So, okay. For the listeners, I've known Brittany a long time. I was trying to do the math. I was like 8 years, maybe?
So I started practicing in 11. Maybe we met in 11, but 12.
We moved to New York in 11. Yeah. So
yeah, we started together.
Right. So we've known each other a long time, and we've known each other pre-kids.
Yes.
So that's super fun because I always say, like, I don't identify as a mom. Like, I forget. It's kind of like you forget that some people don't know your maiden name, which is Fitzpatrick, for anyone wondering. And yours is Bisnot. So if anyone needs to, like, super Google stalk us, those are our maiden names. But I forget that some people don't have that perspective of, like, who I am. And I just think it's really fun to be doing this with you because, like, I left. So for anyone who doesn't know this, I moved away from New York, like, right after Brittany had her first kid. So, like, I knew the pre-kids version of you far better.
Yeah.
And I like
different. It is not that much different.
Right. There's just more responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, I guess.
So let's let's start with, you obviously had a freaking awesome life. You've got this amazing boo. You've got the cool ass job. Like, you're boss lady. Why have kids?
So, the easy answer is I've always wanted them. It's always been expected of me. So I don't know if I would have always wanted them if it wasn't expected of me.
Right. You're like one of 6. So
yeah. And my family, we're Jamaican. My dad's heritage is also Indian. It's very, you have children. But the flip side is having 5 older brothers and watching how society raises boys into men and what is expected of them. It's so different than what was expected of a female. And I pushed back a lot. I used to get made fun of when I was little because I didn't want to learn how to cook. And then I married someone who loves to cook. It was just a master.
But you do bake hard, girl.
I do.
You bake hard.
I just unbelievable. I've made at least 300 cookies over Christmas. Like, I love baking. But the thing is, it's I did always want children. I did always want a family. But fun fact, when my now husband and I were dating, like, very early on, like within the first 3 months, I said to him, I said, what if I'm barren? And he was like,
first of all, the word choice, but go ahead.
So my thing is, I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer since I was I'm that weirdo, right? Like, I was 6 and I'm like, well, I want to be a lawyer, an astronaut, doctor, obviously. And then it just narrowed to lawyer. And I got lucky that I found something that I love in the profession. A lot of my life I attribute to being in the right place for luck to strike. And the flip side, though, I said, I'll take another job. I'll live anywhere, but I really want kids. And I said to him, I said, what if I'm barren? Can you wrap your head around adoption? And he was like, I guess. And I was like, I understand you're 19, but like, seriously.
I was gonna say, you're like in your college dorm and he's like, yo, this chick is crazy.
In his college dorm room. And I was like, okay, so like adoption. And he was like, okay, and that was always, I guess my thing too is always that kid who is thinking 12 steps ahead. And so I knew I wanted children. What if I couldn't biologically have children? What do I do? And I always want to help. I always want to help. And so if it was came to adoption, it came to adoption. And to be very clear, I have 2 biological children and we're still talking adoption. Like that was always our plan. It was just how we were going to get there. So it's the expectations, but then morphing it into what I wanted and how I wanted it to go as to why I became a mother.
Right. And we were talking before we started recording that, like, I can't wrap my head around the fact that you were only 27 when you had your first kid, because I think of you as being so professionally accomplished, and so many people choose to defer having kids until they've kind of gotten where they want to go in their career. How did the timing decision come to be?
So I can't help but laugh. I decided when I was 12 that if I was going to go to college, I was starting at 17, I'd graduate at 21, I'd go straight to law school. There's no time to rush, to take off. So 21 to 24 would be law school. I'd give myself about a year and then I'd get married and then give myself 2 years in a marriage and then have a baby.
Nailed it.
I did. I got married at 25, a year out of law school, and then I had a baby 2 years later. And it was very much accidental in the sense of I would never looked back at that plan and said, well, I have to meet those things. You
manifested it. You just you had the intention and it happened.
Yes. I put myself in the position to get lucky. That's really circumstances meant I couldn't take any time off between law school and college because as a Canadian, I was always on a student
had to start school immediately, right?
Exactly, or get kicked out of the country. And it was really one of those, what is my resume going to say with these huge gaps and things? And it was always fighting an uphill battle, being international. And
you and Ray were long distance for some of that too.
My first year of college, he was finishing up university.
Your first year of law school.
Law school, yes, yeah. Law school. Yes. And so then he moved to DC. We were living just outside in Arlington and Alexandria. But then it was just really one of those, when we got engaged, we were engaged for 2 years. It really wasn't I
don't think I knew that.
Yeah. 2 full years, like almost to the day. And so it really wasn't like we have a plan and this has to go this way. It was just, we're young. We're 23 when we get engaged. We got to take our time and save money.
Right. Which Alex and I were as well. We got engaged at 20. God, what year? We got married when we were 24 and we were engaged for a year and a half. So we got engaged at 23. Yeah.
So getting married at 25 was it just happened that way. And then we very much were we want to live. We want to travel. We want to, And then it was a point that we kind of looked at each other and we were we know we're very logical people. We know we're never going to be financially ready because there's no such thing. Who is financially ready for a baby?
Especially when you have no idea how that's going to go, right? You could have any number of medical issues. You could have fertility treatments for some people. Yep.
I mean, we were very lucky and blessed that the job I ended up getting in New York was a government job. I had health. Right. I had, FMLA was guaranteed. It wasn't great. It wasn't ideal, but, so, okay, fine. This is, I'll caveat this. Both of my parents in my life have had to go out of work on permanent disability. Always making sure I had a fallback plan was necessary. And those are that's why it's kind of I've always been the person who has to think 12 step ahead because I've lived in the world of indecision, where my mother and father managed a household with 8 people while on disability, which is you can't do that in the States, right?
This is Canada.
This is Canada. But I also saw them with their pain and all the things they had to manage and go through and being a little girl. And sometimes my dad couldn't pick me up, just little things you take for granted that I knew I can't take those things for granted. I have to think about these things. Do I want children? I have to map it out. And then things don't go to plan and that's fine. I also have to be flexible, but,
which is actually a great segue into like you're, for anyone who, everything Brittany has said is like so on point for Brittany of like, well, of course I had this plan, like obviously. I feel like at some point we have to just like plug that you're also like a very fun person, because this might sound like you're like super intense and you're not, but you have your shit together. Like that's who you are. And then, as happens to everyone who gets pregnant, then you get pregnant and like the plan kind of goes, I mean, maybe you can hold on to the plan for a little while. Like it works for 7 months or it works for 9 months and then you have the birth. So walk us through your first pregnancy, birth, like just the highlights, the lowlights, the cliff notes.
So, we had been trying maybe 3 months and, we were young. And so I got pregnant, super excited. Things are going well. And to be very clear, I had so Ray and I actually, and the joke about having the baby at 27, we had been trying about a year earlier. And then there was a loss in my family and we immediately prayed I was not pregnant. It was just too soon and too close and really heartbreaking for everyone. And it was just one of those things where I never felt safe. I was completely healthy pregnant, but there's never a point in a pregnancy that you're safe, even after the baby comes out, right? There's SIDS, right? But at least if the baby's in there and I can feel them and I can feel them moving, they're as safe as they can be. But I had a friend who delivered at about 31 weeks and the baby didn't make, like, it's just, there was never I was always, my anxiety, hopefully the baby heard what I said and not what I felt. I tried to project calmness and everything, but the fear, and I'll say this, I have anxiety. That's its own thing with me. I've done therapy intermittently throughout my life since I was about 14. It's its own thing. And so pregnancy went great. And except, and I'm putting air quotes up, it went great. But for me personally, they always say, never read about the worst case scenario. It'll just make you think you have it. It's way worse. I am the person who needs to read it to be like, well, it's not that. Okay.
So this is actually I'm like looking over at my bookshelf and I don't have any of my books on it because I'm moving out of the studio, but I wish I could attribute the quote, but there's a quote that says, worry is the work of pregnant women. And it's so true that pregnant people, like it's like we all think that if we think about the worst case scenario, then we're going to manifest it. And that's not how it works, because if that were true, then all of us who are going around being like, I'm going to have a beautiful candlelit birth, like we would all be creating that. And that's not how it works. You have to worry. Like you have to allow yourself to feel your feels. That's not the same as like living in the anxiety. But to actually like go through and read, like, okay, what are the risks? What can happen? I think the worst thing you can, not the worst thing you can do. No, it is very problematic if you refuse to look at like what potential negative things can happen and just like roll into the hospital at your birth and be like, what? I don't know. We're just gonna,
that's the equivalent of just not going to checkups because it's fine. It's fine. And it's like, well, we don't do that. So you take the last step, do the research.
Right.
But I was legitimately reading like, there's the what to expect book. And they're like, do not flip to page 67 unless you have this. And it's like, I was already reading 69 through 70, and so during pregnancy with her, it was good. It was, I'd say the last month I started swelling. Just common and normal, but very fast. So I had that athlete body for the first 5 months of my pregnancy. Nobody could tell I was pregnant. I remember being 5.5 months and telling one of my friends, I was like, hey, I'm pregnant. And he was like, man, it could have been a beer gut. Like I would never have known. And I actually, that was a compliment. Like it was very, very nice. But it's just one of those things where and I could feel it and I knew it was happening. My abs were fighting they were like, we don't do this. And
Mhm.
then my child was like, oh, yes, you do.
Mhm.
And it would be like, I'd go home for a week and come back to work. And by Monday, people would be like, I can tell you're bigger. Like it's been 2.5 days. Like the last couple months, I just, not necessarily put on so much weight, though that was a goal of mine.
I remember you telling me like, I want to eat everything. I want to get so fat. Like,
and that was my thing. And I still really stand by this. Pregnancy is the only, quotes, acceptable time for a woman to put on weight.
They say put on weight whenever you want, but
exactly 100%. But I was like, if everyone's going to condone this, I want to see how big I'm going to get. Like it was just, I was like, let's go. I feel
like I need to put like asterisk. I do not endorse this.
No, and I don't. It's funny. I don't endorse it. And like it's been its own thing that I've dealt with its own mental consequences, not physical. I don't care. My body birthed 2 wonderful babies. Yeah. But it was very much like I was trying to get big, but it happened so fast. And like this is not your mama podcast, so I feel comfortable in saying this. There's no such thing as TMI around birthing and babies. These stretch marks just exploded. Clearly, I was like, man, I should have done this gradually. Just to give the body a chance, a fighting chance.
Which is, I mean, not necessarily something you even can do.
Yeah, I mean, I ate a lot. Like, I ate a lot. Like, even you don't have to eat for 2. I wasn't just eating for 2. I wasn't stopping at 2. Okay, I was rounding home. That's where I was going. Third base was.
Love it.
Yeah. So basically I started swelling near the end and it was not concerning. My blood pressure usually ranges low to normal, nothing concernably low, but I'm definitely barely hitting like normal. 120 over, 70. It was okay as it went. And I remember this very clearly. I was due on a Sunday. And I went in for my last appointment on a Wednesday. And I had gone after work, which was pretty atypical. So my blood pressure was like 140 over, I can't remember what. And they were like, well, maybe because you just came from work, after we're done the appointment, we're gonna have you lay down for 20 minutes, not move, and we'll take it again. It was the exact same. So they were like, okay, so we're gonna call it preeclampsia right now. This is so abnormal for you, but you gotta come back in 2 days for a stress test. I'm like, oh, it's Friday. That's my last day of work. But, it was fine. I went, they were like, the baby's fine. Your blood pressure's still high. The cure for this is delivery.
Is to have the baby.
Yeah. I was 1 centimeter dilated. They were like, you're due in 2 days. We'll see. So the next day I woke up and I felt like, so the thing is, I did not feel my Braxton Hicks contractions. Yes, I get it. Knock on wood. I really feel really bad for women who go through weeks and weeks of the uncomfortableness of it. There would just be a point where I'd touch my stomach and it'd be hard as a rock. And I had no idea. I'd be like, oh, I guess that's it. So Saturday I woke up and I started feeling things. And my biggest fear is not the pain of childbirth. It was giving birth on the sidewalk.
I thought you were going to say what my greatest fear was, which was pooping in birth.
Nope. I'm super like, I'm probably going to poop on the table. Like that was just, it's going to happen. What are you going to do?
That's how most people are. I'm just weird.
No, you're not weird. Way more people are like, I've told people, I'd be like, oh yeah, and you're going to poop. And they're like, I'm sorry, what? And I was like, isn't that like.
Before I had a child, my husband had never witnessed me pooping. Had never walked through the room, had never known that's what was happening behind a closed door.
My husband used to lock me out. There's no boundaries. There's just none whatsoever.
So your greatest fear was having this child on the sidewalk?
Yeah. And, being outside of New York City, that was, I think a week before I was due, a woman literally gave birth on 3rd Avenue. She didn't make it. Deliver right there. She didn't realize she was so far into labor. Or having it in the cab, right? I just didn't want to not know I was having a baby and then, think I'm pooping and the baby comes, that was just not where I wanted that to go. So I'm like, ooh, and I call my OB and it was great as they have a practice. So it's not like I had to go to the hospital. I just got to go into their office. They checked me out and they were like, you're 2 centimeters now. Like you're good. You should be giving birth within 24 hours. And I was like, oh, okay. Who gets that timeline, right? So when I finally go and I finally check into the hospital, and I'm like, all right, let me walk around. Let me do those active things. Let me be all good. They were like, your blood pressure is so high. You need to lay down. But laying down was the worst thing for my contractions where they were. I was like, I can't do that. And they were like, well, then you need to be in arm's distance of the bed in case you faint. They were just like so blunt, which I actually appreciated. And I was, and I had to get permission to go to the bathroom. I had, if I was going to move away from that bed, they needed to know. And they had the permanent,
And they were still viewing you as preeclampsia.
Yes. They, I was strapped up and they took my blood pressure every 15 minutes and everything. And it just steadily went
They didn't
up.
at any point induce you, right? This was just natural labor.
Natural labor. So
which for anyone listening, I will note, if you have preeclampsia, they often will induce you. Once you're induced, contractions are much more intense. So the fact that Brittany is laboring naturally at this point is probably because her provider felt that she was just going into labor on her own and allowed it to progress naturally. Often in preeclampsia, if it's more severe, they'll just be like, you're going to the hospital and you're just going to get induced right now. And then it's all much more intervention once you've been induced.
So I labored eventually. It's funny. I really didn't want to have an epidural. Like that was my, let's not do that. And then I had just been up all night and it was 6 a.m. And I turned to my husband and I said, okay, we got to do this. And he was like, you told me to talk you out of this. And I was like, no. I'm not in my head. It's really not the pain. Like, that's not what this is. I need to sit down. I need to take a nap. I won't be able to push. I'm not even fully dilated. If we were close to the end, maybe, but mentally I was like, I've been up all night. I can't do this. Or I don't want to.
This is a very common, really good use case for an epidural is just like, if you've been laboring for so long that you're just exhausted, or sometimes if you've been laboring and you've been working really hard and nothing's progressing. Those are kind of the two use cases where often an epidural will allow, in the first case, allow you to take a nap. In the second case, allow your body to relax, right? So you're like having some kind of resistance to allowing labor to progress, not consciously. You're unconsciously, physiologically resisting the opening. And so an epidural can, if you have a lot of pain, you might be cringing and clamping down. So carry on. Epidural.
So
excellent use case for one.
Got the epidural, literally took a nap, they broke my water. And then I progressed into labor, which the doctor did say the worst thing he could have said to me, not worse, but he said, okay, first time moms usually labor about an hour to 2 hours. But the harder you push, the faster the baby comes. And before he walked out of the door, I said, challenge.
You're an athlete.
Exactly. I said, challenge accepted.
No.
I called him back in 20 minutes and he barely got his gloves and, the whole gown on to catch the baby. Like they were breaking down the table as I'm pushing her out. And the fun thing is we didn't know what we were having. So they allowed my husband to call it out and say it's a girl. And so the thing is though, he saw it. I didn't see it. And I'm just there with my little epidural and not realizing anything. And my husband said that it was 200 over, 90 something maybe was the first blood pressure after I had delivered. And then they were like, that can't be right. And then the next one was 190 something. And they were like, okay, all right, let's figure this out. And then they, pumped me with magnesium sulfate and all the things to try and manage that. Well, then post-delivery, when they started doing the blood work, they saw my levels, my hemoglobin and everything and my counts. And they were like, we're going to need to get a hematologist in here. And it wasn't until they did the full panel and got the blood work back and saw my enzymes and saw everything that they officially diagnosed me with HELPP syndrome.
And that was all happening while you were still at the hospital.
Yes. I stayed an extra day because they put me on a round of steroids. And yeah, so my thing is, I remember being just fine, and they give me the baby, and they dealt with the placenta, and I'm there and I'm with her. And then, I, at a point though, I started having back pain, which was completely separate from the HELLP syndrome. That was literally, I strained a muscle in my back pushing too hard.
I thought you were going to say epidural, because sometimes epidural site pain is normal as well.
I thought it was the epidural. And when they came to remove it, because I was in so much pain and I kept being like, you have to get the anesthesiologist, like this is killing me. The anesthesiologist is like, that's not where the pain is. Like where you're telling me your pain is, I was higher than that. Like it wasn't close. And I was like, oh, okay. So I remember that, but the thing is, I didn't know what was going on. And I started feeling, I'd say almost delirious. Like I was just like, I don't feel good. And by the time they had just cleared for, say, my family to come in, I felt terrible. And I literally said to my husband, and I hear my dad coming, and he takes like 2 steps in the door, and he's just like ready to congratulate me. And to be clear, my dad's like my biggest coach. Like he's just like, yeah. And I say to my husband, quick, I said, get him out of here. I can't have him see me like this, which I don't know what like this was. I just knew I didn't feel right. And my dad would freak out. So my husband, all 5'10.5" of him, just bounds.
Your dad is not a small dude.
Bounds up to my 6'4" dad, and 2 hands shoves him backwards out the room. And it was just like a reactionary thing.
That's amazing.
Even I was like, that's acceptable. Like that was fun. He did what I needed. And that's it. And then I passed out, and I was unconscious for hours.
Oh my God.
They didn't move me to a recovery room. They moved me to a further away delivery room. So I was still near the nurses. I was out. And I was like, thankfully I had, I'd say about an hour, maybe a little longer with the baby.
I was going to say like skin to skin and all of that.
Yeah. It breastfed, like, tried at least. But then that's it. And the thing is, when I woke up, what I realized is my husband stayed at my bedside and didn't update anybody as to anything. And
oh, geez.
My parents thought I was dying. And they had no idea what was going on. I mean, I had no idea what was going on. It's not like I could.
You were unconscious. Yeah.
Right. And my husband was really confused, and he didn't necessarily understand it, but he was like, I'm not going to leave here. He's like, it's great. We just had a baby, but like, yeah, let my mom see the baby, like let them see the baby. And even
so they saw the baby. They just didn't see you.
Right. So that's the thing. But my parents were like, listen, great, granddaughter, lovely. What's happening with my daughter? And it was just one of those like very confusing, very hectic things. But when I finally woke up, like the nurse was like, oh, she pooped. And I was like, oh, Ray, you should change a diaper. And he was like, I changed like 4. And that's when I realized how long I'd been out. And I didn't get it. I was like, oh, I must've just, been exhausted. Again, not understanding the gravity of any of it.
So when did you actually understand? So HELLP syndrome, HELLP is, and you told me before we started, like, you can give a better definition than I can. I really can't. It is very confusing. But HELLP syndrome is basically like a quote unquote more severe version of preeclampsia. It has to do with the levels of different things in your blood. Sometimes it's associated with protein in the urine, not always. It's sometimes associated with swelling, not always. It's basically just something that becomes a medical emergency. Like it's usually pretty emergent, that it's just like, oh, and we've transitioned from preeclampsia, we'd like you to have this baby soon, to like very serious, if you haven't had the baby yet, you're going in for an emergency C-section, like very active care. And so if this happens to you, if you're like, I want to have a natural birth, you will always know the difference when like people are coming in and they're like, we're doing this like now. This is an emergency. It will be very clear.
So it's a fun question to say, when did I realize the gravity of it, the severity of it, or anything? I didn't. when they came in to tell me, and this is the hematologist now who's talking about blood work. So the interesting thing, protein in the urine wasn't there. All like, every time I went in for my checkups, that it wasn't there. He came in, he's telling me about it, telling me the diagnosis, telling me about my blood count. And, I'm like, okay, can I breastfeed? Is this going to affect this? And he was like, no, you'll be fine. And I was like, okay, then leave. Like, do what you got to do. I'm super about, you're a medical professional. Do what you got to do. I trust you. Not blindly, but still, I trust you. This sounds fine. If this is not going to affect me and this baby, then I really kind of don't care right now. And that is one of those things where people need to talk about it more, because I had real difficulty breastfeeding those 3 days in the hospital. My daughter became dehydrated. She started crystallizing in her urine, and they had to feed her a bottle, which is what I didn't want, and it wasn't, I'll say this, I'm not one of those people who cannot change. I have plans. I make plans. I wanted to breastfeed, but if my daughter's dehydrated, give her a bottle. My God. But I didn't appreciate that a nurse brought in, was it the pediatrician? But it was in the middle of the night, and she like browbeat me into it. And I was like delirious. Like delirious was a very common factor in this hospital stay.
Which is also a common factor generally in postpartum. So
exactly. I didn't think anything was abnormal about this.
Right.
This is what they tell you you're going to experience as a new mom.
Yeah.
You're going to be tired.
Right.
I didn't appreciate that. I don't think the nursing staff fully understood HELLP syndrome either, because at 3 a.m. when I'm breastfeeding, they just left me alone in the room. And I now realize, especially having had a second child and having the exact same scenarios, I was so at risk of just fainting or falling over. I was so exhausted. Like I'd have to keep prodding my husband to wake up and help me, because I was like, I don't feel safe. Like I don't feel like the baby is safe if I'm alone at this hour with her.
Right, holding her, right.
Yeah. And I think part of it was just like my body was too exhausted to generate anything, like anything for her. And she was just a sleepy baby, and she didn't want to wake up even for food. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? She's sleeping. And they were like, flick her feet. And I'm like, literally like flicking her feet. And I was like, hello, she's still sleeping. And they were like, you got to do something. And I was like, okay, you have way more experience with these babies than I do. What is this something you speak of? But yeah, no, I literally put it out of my mind. I left the hospital. They told me I was fine. I put it out of my mind. I'd say at least for the first 3 weeks, it was going through motions. And if I had understood that my body just hadn't caught up to any semblance of normalcy, more than just, oh, you're a new mom, I would have taken better care. I would have asked for a lot more help. I would have done things differently.
Right. And you've now done this again. You've done that first 3 weeks postpartum.
Right. So pregnancy wise, I very much was like, I'm going to wait. I am going to wait a little bit. Like there's no getting back on the horse. There's no window where it's going to be okay until my body feels okay. And about a year after giving birth, I was in a car accident and it was okay. I just had issues, like mainly my shoulder and my arm. And it didn't affect anything, for reproductive issues, but it was just, if my body doesn't feel okay, I don't feel like putting it through something unnecessary. Not that it didn't have value, but it just wasn't going to be what I did. So I rehabbed that for a while. And then, it was like, okay, I think we can try again. I think we can do this. And we tried in 2017, and I was pregnant so early, like maybe the second time, we really tried. And
I like the idea of really trying. Yeah. Like there's like kind of trying, and then there's really trying.
There's the, I mean, if it happens.
Yeah.
And then there's the, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like, get in here. I'm ovulating.
That may or may not have been a scene out of what happened. So I got pregnant. It was great. I've had all the same things and the tenderness of the breasts and, just the way my diet changed, I was craving, raw. And then I went to the doctor and he was like, well, I don't see a heartbeat, but it's very early. And we were like,
Do you know when you went? Like 10 weeks or?
No, not even. It was very early. That's the thing. We were going on vacation and 8 weeks was going to happen like on the vacation. So we went a little early. So I'd say it was 6.5 weeks or something. So that's why he was like, it happens, like this is not abnormal. And so I was like, okay, but I also was like, he's not optimistic, but I'm not going to think like that. This is just I know it's early. And the logical part of me is like walking me through all the steps. It's fine. Just take your time. We'll see. We'll come back after. And then I went on vacation and I was in a cabin up in the Adirondacks and I started bleeding. And, I read a whole bunch of stuff that was like, this is common around this time. It's fine as long as, it's not heavy or whatever. And I was like, okay, this didn't happen the first time. I get that the internet says it's normal. The internet is the internet. Like, there's a reason.
The internet doesn't know as much as like my intuition.
Right. And then it picked up and I called my OB and they were like, get here so we can check you. And I was like, not possible. And they were like, okay, well, then you got to go to the hospital. And, it got to a point where I started cramping and it was extremely heavy. And I was like, all right, guess we got to go. And at this point, we were with a group of friends. My husband, 2 friends are literally camping up in the mountains, no service. I'll see him in 2 days. It's me and my best friend. She doesn't have a license. And then my dog. So we pack up because I don't feel comfortable going by myself, knowing it's a significant drive away. And she can't drive me. So I'm literally driving myself an hour and a half to the hospital as I know I'm having a miscarriage.
Ugh.
And we get there, they confirm it. And it's just, it was weird and surreal. And it's trying, my best friend stayed out in the lobby with my daughter, trying to entertain her. We brought dolls. There was a TV. Oh, she barely watched TV. So she was just, this is great. And at some point she'd bring her back. One, she knew I wanted to see her and hold her and have this manifestation.
How old was she?
Almost 3. Yeah, she was turning 3.
Was she really? Okay.
So, there were points where I just like hold her and just like want to squeeze her. But then she's like, can we go back out to the TV?
To the TV, right?
Fine. So I'm laying in the hospital room by myself, knowing, and waiting. And it was just, they, took my blood so they had the levels and they did the, transvaginal ultrasound and there was nothing there. And I was like, okay, all right. So then that was just it. Once they discharged me, they discharged me. I bought a bunch of alcohol and back to the cabin. And
so Ray is gone this whole time. He doesn't even know that this has happened.
Yeah, not at all. Which I think affects what happened to us after. Because it was there were 2 very different reactions to this. And the thing is, I know, again, having read the literature, that a lot of times for men in general, or the non-pregnant spouse, I should say, it's not real to them until there's a baby. Right. Or at least movement in the belly, right? Like at least a little alien in there.
Yeah, they talk about, often the person carrying the baby has the experience of becoming a parent over the course of 9 months. And of course, it all becomes more real at the end. But the other person who's not carrying the child, often it's like a light switch flips and they're like, all of a sudden they're a parent.
Yeah.
So he hadn't really experienced this.
Right. And for him, even what I found out later with the doctor's appointment, he was like, well, maybe you aren't pregnant. Like maybe that never happened. Maybe it just didn't.
It wasn't real in the first place.
Right. So it was for him, I remember when I was pregnant the first time, he like got very emotional when he heard the heartbeat, like very emotional. And I was like, I've been telling you for weeks I'm pregnant, you know? So, but he was like, well, it wasn't real until then. And until he held her, he was like, oh my God, like, oh man, this baby, it's a baby. And I'm like, exactly. So, you know,
You're like, no, I've just been eating a lot.
Right. So it's like, I understood this would be different as far as effect on him. He also is very good as effect on me, but really what had to happen is that I didn't tell him. He called me like the next morning when he had service. And then I can't remember if it was the next day or the day after when I picked him up. And I'm literally picking him up with 2 other people and driving him back. And I had to like, he's all happy telling me about his trip. And I'm just quiet because I'm like, I'm not going to tell you right now. You know, and I bring him home, I bring him out or back to the cabin and I tell him privately. And he was just like, oh my God, duh. And it was one of those things where he was like, how can I best support you? What can I do? And that's the thing with my husband. And
Right.
I know most men, how do we fix it? And
Yeah.
it's like, you can't. Like, unless you can go back in time and make this not happen, there's no fixing a miscarriage. Like that's, what do we do? Nothing. We move on, and without moving on, you know, we like you said earlier, you feel the feels. Like, you know, one of the things I say often is you get to be upset at upsetting things. Like, I feel like too often there is this, okay, how do we move forward? Sometimes you just stay there.
Right.
Like, you know, if it's like feet in the mud, you just stay there. You feel the mud, like you be in that moment. It was very hard for me in the sense of I was on vacation.
Right.
I had 3 other people, not, you know, my husband not included, that I didn't want to ruin their vacation. But I'm also not the person to not say it. So like, I'm literally downing wine and being like, well, I guess I lost the baby, you know? So, and you know, it was just one of those things that was, I will say, the people we were with included my 2 best friends in the world. So if it was gonna happen, happening with them is the only, like, it was unbelievably wonderful in that sense.
So recognizing that you're speaking not for all people who've ever had a miscarriage, but just for Brittany.
Yeah.
What do you feel like was the most supportive or helpful thing that people did for you, with you after? And what was the like, for the love of God, people don't ever do this?
So I am a very like, one of the things I learned in therapy when I was in college at this point was thought stopping. When you have a bad thought or a negative thought, you literally either out loud or in your head scream stop at yourself. And if you do it enough, you'll be able to just silently just stop it. You just stop it. When people did things I did not like or appreciate, I literally said stop. Or like if it was on the phone, I'd hang up. I'd be like, I'm gonna hang up now. So I can't say what the worst thing someone, I don't remember. I would have stopped anything. I would have been like, no, not okay.
And that requires quite a bit of self-awareness.
Oh my,
to even know what you do and don't like, which is always something I encourage people to figure out in pregnancy. Like if you have relationship issues, if you have, you know, like things that you need to go to therapy for, like if you've had sexual trauma, like sort that, I mean, you're never going to be like a beautiful wrapped up after, but like as best you can, like address those things before you have a kid, because it's all like, I mean, intergenerational trauma for one, but like also just,
it gets exacerbated.
Yes, everything is ramped up where it's like, oh, you think you and your partner like snap at each other now? Well, how about you like decide to be sleepless and like do the hardest thing you've ever done together?
Yep.
So anyway, you have a lot of self-awareness to be able to say like, I don't want that.
And to be very honest, like without all of the therapy that I did, I would not have had that, you know, and that's another part of the planning, to know I get, and my anxiety is very much put in effect and triggered when I make a plan and it goes haywire, not for, you know, regular reasons, right? Like you want to do something and it rains. Okay, what are you going to do about that? Nothing. There's nothing to be upset about. But it's like, I wanted to leave by 10 o'clock. I told you the day before, why are you getting ready at 9:59? Like that, you know, that is what sends me.
You like control.
I like trying to control. I like planning. If you can control it, I like to control it. Like that's the thing. There's the point where you cannot control certain things. The perfect example is
you can't control miscarriage.
Right. You can't control miscarriage. So the thing is, it's like, I felt like I was of two selves at that point. There is the logical, reasonable, researched, educated me who always knows, who knows that most women have miscarriages before they even know they're pregnant, right? Like within your cycle, you could just never know.
Right.
You know, I took biomedical ethics in college. I loved philosophy. There is the known and the unknown. And you know, I had those internal conversations and debates about things like that, and knowing the numbers and the percentages.
Right. 1 in 5 or 1 in 4. I can't remember women. 1 in 4 women has a miscarriage. Right.
And having family members who have had issues and it just, that was always possible. The logical part of me was like, you're okay. You've had a baby. You know you can. This isn't Brittany being afraid of being barren. This isn't that. This is something else.
Right.
And you know, the doctors, and especially like when I went afterwards and saw my OB and everyone, they were like, listen, the way it was explained, and it actually made perfect sense, because I think I used almost the exact same wording to Ray. And I was like, well, maybe it was just, it didn't like burrow down for the rains and it got swept up in the rains. And they were like, it just probably didn't get far enough in to not be swept away when your cycle came. Like that.
So I've looked at unfortunately, we don't have a lot of data around miscarriage, that we don't really know why the vast majority happen. But the really important thing for people to know is that overwhelmingly miscarriage happens due to a cellular abnormality. So it's like, it never was a viable, and right. I know you're logical, so this is helpful for you. And some people it will be very helpful, and other people will be like, it doesn't help me at all. But like, it's not like, what you lost was your own hope and plan and idea of what was going to happen. And if it's helpful, you can know that you never actually lost a viable child.
So, yeah. And it's for me, that was very much the conversation. I need to feel this as much as I can know it. You can know a fact, but it doesn't mean you believe it or feel it or trust it. And I didn't trust anything at that point. And I will say, you know, like, this is not the people who have, you know, 12-week, 13-week, later on miscarriages, or, you know, it was just, it had already affected my body. Already felt the changes. I already had those things that were the telltale signs when I was pregnant the first time. You know, I had the experience to know that it was real, scientifically, biologically, but it wasn't anything yet. Like, right, it didn't have time to take like that for me. Like it was very early. I think about it and I don't know the answer. I don't know if it's worse because I had a child before, or better because I had a child before, right? On my ability to not think of myself as a failure, I had proven I can have a child, because society tells women your worth is, and if you have babies. And I've always disagreed with that 100%. But it doesn't mean that it hasn't been taught to you. It doesn't mean that you have to actively overcome that. So, well, I'm not a failure because I have had a child. I know my insides work. So I have value. No, like it was just it, but I had to get past that conversation as a whole. But the problem is being logical and being scientific and being the type of person who trusts in that. I failed because it didn't work.
Mm.
That was the part that I had to get past. And my body had started to change and now it's empty. And like, it was very much a conscious, like, how do I talk to myself about that? Like, how do I have that conversation? Because nobody can console me about that. Like, it's, you don't feel what I feel. I have to figure out a way to wrap my head around these definitions that I truly believe in who I am as a person. It's not, I don't care about womankind in my quest to have children. That's not what I'm advancing. I'm advancing Brittany. And it's true. Why do we have kids if we're thinking about everybody else? You don't. You have a kid for yourself. You have, your partner as well. But the child, like, I think if you don't want a child, you shouldn't have a child. That's right. You get to be that strong. You get to have your worth be however you define yourself. And I wanted another child. We chose to do. We were trying.
Right.
The changes. There was enough, of my HCG count to say that there was something in there, and now it's not there. And the sense of loss wasn't for a baby. It was for, like you said, the thoughts and where I thought it was going. And, but it was hard too, because there are those tangible things. They're like, for me, especially like my body, I felt change. So it was very, very hard. So one of the best things that I will say people did, and these are the people closest to me who know me, they're like, what do you need me to do? And some days it was literally nothing. Sit beside me, don't do anything, just that's it. I will, shocker, I've described my father, my coach, my whatever, he's my person that I know, like, high five, hug, like that's I know I have his support. I didn't want it then because I know I have it unconditionally. That's not what I needed. My mother actually did the best thing she could. And my mother and I, we have a contentious relationship. And she's always there to give advice. And that's sometimes what makes me so mad. I don't want advice. I just want, just be there. And she just was. She's on the phone with me and she's getting ready to go somewhere and she had to leave by a certain time. And I was like, oh, I just wanted to talk. And she was like, okay. And I was like, but you're busy. You got to go. She was like, no. She was like, I can be late. This doesn't matter. And she just sat silently on the phone with me until I started talking. And it was the first time that I felt like, okay, that it's okay. Like, if she's gonna listen, like,
right. If this like embodiment of, like, I almost want to say it's like this embodiment of like doing, achieving, going, and if she's able to stop and sit, then it almost gives you this permission of like, okay, it's okay for me. I mean, our moms, like, they have like a lot of power, I think, lifelong to create safety.
Yep.
And so for someone in that parental role, that nurturing figure who often is the North Star of our achievement, if they can pull back and say like, no, this is a time that we stop. Right. And often moms aren't good at that. Right. Like,
to be very clear, that when and this was like, I'm in the liquor store after the hospital. I call my parents and I'm like, I had a miscarriage. And her first question was, well, why? And I was like,
oh my God,
I don't know. What do you mean? Like,
well, that was silly. Why did you do that?
And that's, she's the type of person to just say what she's thinking. And she meant what happened at some point.
Right. How did it happen? Right.
Right. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like, right. So this is a later conversation. This is I'm back home a few days later and we're just talking. And, so for her to be the one she can set me off. She could just walk in a room and I'm like, and that's on me. But for that moment, like for really, that moment was just, I think if anyone in the circumstance, and I have had, friends who experience certain things, and for me, I don't know what to do, and we can't know what to do because that is an individual and a person, and they need what they need, and how would I know that? I'm not them. So it's kind of a, what do you need? And not want, need. And maybe they don't know, and you just wait, and you just wait, and you stay, and you just wait, and my mom stayed silently on the phone until I felt like talking it through. And it was just the most you could do. And I think the flip side is, and it's so funny because having been someone who's always looked into this, I'm like, this is so widely known. And then I realized that so many people just don't know how to talk to mothers and people who have miscarriage, whatever, because they shy away from the sad things and the icky things. But to me, I'm like, isn't it common knowledge that you have to validate this? Don't tell them, oh, you can try again. Oh, it'll be fine. Oh, you're young. Oh, that's the
you're young.
Past this. This is the moving past it. The person is grieving a loss that they have.
Yeah, if it was anyone else, you would never be like, if someone's mother died, you would never be like, well, you can have another.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. So, and it was
just your mom.
And I'll say this. So I will say one of the hardest things too is that I bled for weeks after, and it was a thought I had, and it's one of the hardest thoughts, and I'm going to try and articulate it without choking up too much, but laying in the hospital and I'm heavily bleeding. In my mind, I kept thinking, as I, go and I changed my pad or something, was that the baby? At what point did the baby leave my body? And it's like, I am very much like, yes, it's a fetus. I that scientific part of it, but it doesn't matter. What point did the fertilized egg leave my body? Is this me throwing it in the garbage?
Yeah.
That was hard. And it's like, women have these problems, or, imagine having to get a TNC. I can't imagine, I had a friend who told me that she was, she worked in family court as well. And she said that her DNC was scheduled for a couple days later, and she had to sit and listen to litigants and parties argue about their children. And she's literally knows her non-viable child is in her stomach, and she can't remove that yet, as she listens to the people quabble over an extra hour here or there or something. And she's just like, you don't understand what you have. And, and it's like that. It's really, you have to let someone or listen to someone of what they're actually feeling in the moment, and not try and move past it, because it doesn't matter if they can have another child. It just doesn't matter. The women are going to get this question the rest of their, gynecological life. How many pregnancies, and then how many children? You will constantly be reminded of the ones that are lost. So there is no moving past it. It doesn't matter if you can try again. It doesn't matter if you already have a child. It doesn't matter if you have 10 more. There is that 1, 2, 3, 4, however many that didn't make it, and that matters. So it's like long answer. One of the most helpful things you can do is live in the moment with that person.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I think when in any loss, I always talk about this when I'm teaching yoga classes, that one of my jobs as the teacher is to be the person who's like watching the clock and taking care of, like, I'm going to let you know when it's time for you to leave. Like, you don't have to worry about anything else. And I'm not sitting there the whole time being like, all right, we are now 45 minutes into class, so we are going to move onto the floor. It's happening in the background. And I think that unconsciously, that's what holding space means to me, is that I get to feel however I need to feel right now, because I know that someone else is grounded in reality. that someone else is taking care of what is happening in the real world, that I have the luxury of not being in the real world.
This is going to be really crazy. Can we pause for a second?
Yeah, you have someone right there.
It's a court officer. 1 second. Amazing. You want to go with it?
Please. So now you'll be able to get out.
I was wondering about that.
If there are any problems with it, let me know.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay.
So that's actually fine because we're out of time
Ah.
regardless. So we're just going to take all the feels and tie it up in a nice bow. Okay. So so that's what holding space is. That's what I think the most valuable thing that we can do for anyone who's in grief and in loss is to be the anchor.
Yeah.
That in the background you're like being present. It's the same idea of like when like if you don't like to sleep alone, the presence of someone else in the bed is like a comfort. Or if you like I can't think of another example, like just in general, it's like the existence, the presence of another person gives us as humans. It's like the same way that if you look around behind you in a space, you feel safer because you subconsciously know that you're safe. And it's the same thing, that just having someone in a room, allowing you to do whatever you need to do is like very comforting and reassuring, and they can't process your feelings. Like they can't do anything to help you feel better. All they can do is allow you to process.
Right.
And facilitate that.
So it's funny because it's like, I know we're out of time, but I know one of the things that we talked about discussing was the high risk pregnancy after. So I didn't have any complications getting pregnant and being pregnant with my son. Who it was the following year we tried again. And so I gave birth in February of 2019. They declared me high risk because of HELPP. And they were like, instantly, we need a plan. And it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't my regular OB. It was they always sent me out for ultrasounds to a high risk doctor who we loved. He just really was like reassuring. He sees the worst of the worst. And so I remember during my first pregnancy, he was like, just sit down, like relax, just calm down. Don't strain yourself. You don't have to. So don't. And so for this one, when he's like, so how did the first one go? Oh, good. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. And I got HELPP and blah, blah. And he just kind of paused. and that's the thing. It was instantly like, I was like, oh, I clearly did not do enough research to know what this was, because you are taking this very seriously. He was like, oh yeah. And it goes from less than 1% likelihood of you getting it to 30-something% likelihood of you getting it another. And I was just like, I'm sorry, what? And it's 0.5% basically is the likelihood of a woman developing this for the first time. But if you get it once, it just skyrockets the chance of getting it again. So it just, the plan for everything, I was in for ultrasounds every other week until in the end it was weekly. And I was like, how am I supposed to have a job like that? Like,
Yeah.
And they were like, you are not going to 40 weeks. You just won't. We're not letting it happen. You will be induced because you got sick when you hit 40 weeks.
Right. Beyond a certain point, there's always, with induction, it's always you're weighing out what is the risk of having the baby too soon versus what are the increased risks with each subsequent week of pregnancy.
Right. And they basically told me that after 32 weeks, if my blood pressure went up at all, that they were inducing me. They were like, we can't let it get to where it got last time. And everything was good. It was 39. So I had to ask for special permission to go 2 days later because not knowing if you're having a boy or a girl, but my husband's birthday was February 28th and they wanted to induce me for the 26th. And I said, come on, this kid, it just, please let us have that thing. So they brought me in a day early on the 27th. They gave me Cervidil for that, but then basically now knowing my son, but at the time, the baby was like, oh, is this the eviction notice? Okay, I'm leaving. It's fine. They didn't have to give me anything like Pitocin or anything to actively.
That's amazing.
Oh, it was unreal. Which is kind of makes sense for his personality now. Like it's like, here, go jump off this thing. He's like, all right, okay. So labor went well. I did not take an epidural this time simply because I wanted it to go as fast as it could. With that, it went too fast.
I was going to say second kid. Yeah.
Well, I mean, even under that definition, it went too fast. I was only 9 centimeters dilated when he was coming out. The doctor had to give me that little last centimeter, and literally then hop off the table to catch him when he was coming through. I couldn't have a nice birth story. Like, it's literally doctors being like, so, that was its own separate thing. So the HELLP affected that birth. But I didn't have any complications after. My blood pressure stayed within normal range. The birth was good. I pushed 4 times. 2 times I was doing it incorrectly. And then they were like, fix that. So then I pushed 2 times and he came out. It was as lucky as it could be, right? Like, you hear those stories about the long late that I got lucky. Like, that was wonderful. It was hard. And I will say, to get me and my husband to where we were at that point, post miscarriage, took a lot, and it was hard too. Like, we went to couples in individual therapy to mentally realize where the disconnect was with all of that. Like, you asked me what the best thing someone did for me during that time period, and it was my mother. It wasn't my husband. One of the worst things he did for me during that time period was we never talked about it for months. And he was very much like, well, I thought if you wanted to talk about it, you would. And he would have listened and he would have, done what he could, but he was like, I'm going to let you lead the way. And I'm like, no, you don't get it mentally.
It's that holding space thing. It's like, I can't be in charge right now, which is hard to imagine you not being in charge in something.
Yep. And then that's what it was for him. He was like, you are so, like, you're you control, you do, if you wanted to, I assumed you would. And I was like, that's the thing. I just failed at something. I don't find that I am worth controlling anything. You can't control things. Look what happened, you can't control it. So that was really hard. And we had to process that, which brought up its own, in general, like with every couple, I feel like
right. It's like all the things you had to work out, all the things, because all the things are in everything. Everything
led us to here. He took to it more than I thought he would. Not as a negative to him, but just, I've been doing therapy my whole life. Like, I'm used to this. I'm just hopping back on the horse. And he was not, we weren't in a good place when he agreed to it. That was the thing. So, but he also is a people pleaser. Not to please me. If he gets an assignment from a therapist, he wants to do it. That's who he is. But it made for very productive things for himself and figuring out who we are as people. And it has made a world of difference for us in general. Because we never really, it's hard. I hate gender norms as a whole, because it's like saying, well, I don't know, I'm not in line with gender. Well, what are they? They're just crazy. But as I said, I'm the one who, I don't cook as a woman. I'm a career woman. I'm a lawyer. And it's
career woman.
Yeah, but it's he has a great career too. Because of COVID and we've recently moved, he's home with my son. And that's on paper, oh my God, he's a what? But for us, it's like, no, you gotta be flexible. You just gotta do what you do. And, but where we are now versus where we were then is night and day. And it's obviously I can't thank the miscarriage for that, but it was a catalyst. It led us to where we are. But it is just who I am as a whole person. And at the end of the day, it's hard. And I'm the type of person, I feel lucky. I feel blessed. I have so many friends with fertility issues. And I don't know I don't know how to hold space.
Mm-hmm.
How do I, as a person with two, children, hold that space?
Right.
Do they want me to?
And that is actually a topic that I'm hoping to get to on the show, that I have a couple folks who tentatively have said they're willing to talk about that. So I think I think that's a great way to wrap up today, is just to say, like, and the whole point of like why I want to do these stories, these series, is that I haven't experienced all the things. And despite the fact that I've had clients who've had all the things, it doesn't mean that I'm an expert on telling other people, oh, well, when someone's had a miscarriage, this is what they want. And it also doesn't mean that you necessarily like can say, oh, this is what you should do for someone who has had a miscarriage. It's just to say, like, hey, Brittany's a real human. Like, she's an actual person who has experienced this. And this is like this is the inner workings of your brain. And I think it's such a gift for all of us, right? So Brene Brown calls it the vulnerability hangover. Like, it's such a gift to us for you to be here and to be vulnerable and to share what it felt like for you in the moment and what was and what wasn't helpful. And I'm super grateful for that. I think that's like a huge gift to me, but also to everyone who's listening. And just keep being vulnerable. This is for you, but also for anyone listening. Keep being vulnerable. Keep telling people, speak your truth. I hate that phrase, but like, tell your stories, because they really do matter, and they influence, like, the ripples go out so much further than you could possibly imagine, because now the people who've listened to this episode have a little bit more awareness and a little bit more wisdom of how to handle these situations with the people that they love.
Right. I mean, for me, it's just, and I had a friend experience, for like, we talked a lot about our miscarriages, and it was very much and I really appreciate right now that culture is calling out the fact that you don't listen just so you can then tell your story.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just, you wait to then say what you want to say. You actually have to engage and go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes, there's the empathy and show, in the, listen, this is what happened to me. But I always preface mine on, I don't know if this is helpful to you at all. And if it's not, I'm really sorry. I'm apologizing from the start.
Right.
But this is something that I found helpful, and this happened. Do you want that? Do you not want that? Like, where do you want me to shut up now? Like,
would you like me to shut up now?
Yeah.
My husband actually wishes that I would end every sentence that way. So this is what I found helpful. This is how I did things. Would you like me to shut up now?
And at least from her, she was like, no, that really helped, because I think a lot of people in many lives, who, especially those who don't understand, even those who do, it's hard. A lot of the older generation were like, yeah, I lost babies. Then I had 12 more. It'll happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, I only wanted 2, like that's its own thing. But the only hope I have in general, and it's like, I will keep talking, anyone will listen, because if it does help someone see themselves in it, then maybe there's something I did that might help. Mm-hmm. Or they can ask for that of their loved ones. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just so hard. It's so hard. And I love the podcast for this reason. It's like all the facets of motherhood, because
all the hard things.
Yeah. There's no one thing.
I hope I need everyone to just like go drink a glass of water and like look at the sky for a second after this.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Brittany. This has been so wonderful. You've been so generous with your time and your story.
Thank you.